Nahisu had come home late from her exhausting shift again. She stood outside the front door, tired, but something felt off. When she finally opened it, a strange noise echoed from deep inside the apartment. Her heart sank. There were unfamiliar women's shoes at the entrance. On trembling legs, she followed the sound, soft moans growing clearer. When she peeked through the bedroom doorway, she saw him, her husband, with someone else. But just as quickly, she woke up. It was only a nightmare, yet it felt too real. Break time was almost over. Her boss had called out to her, giving her the advance she'd asked for. He appreciated her hard work, always ready to help when she needed it. He casually asked about her debts and if her husband had found a job. Smiling politely, Nahisu said things were getting better. He'd soon land something full-time. The boss gently warned her not to let her husband sit on her neck. A young woman like her shouldn't have to burn herself out from morning to night. Later, while serving tables, she overheard a guy worrying about his girlfriend's diet, telling her to eat properly. Nahisu found herself silently admiring that kind of love, being cared for. She remembered thinking, love feels magical when you're young. But what about when that youth fades? Was her life now just a shadow of something that once mattered? One of her co-workers ranted about being called an ajuma. "I'm still young even if I'm married," she said. She even complimented Nahisu, saying she looked attractive even without makeup, and that she was kind and hardworking. That small compliment lifted her spirits. On the way home, she passed by her younger colleague and secretly admired her. So full of energy and so beautiful, she thought, unlike herself. Her husband barely noticed her anymore. He criticized her appearance, complained that she was always tired, said he hated coming home to see an unkempt wife, but Nahisu hadn't bought anything for herself in months. With all the debt, she couldn't afford it. Makeup was a luxury she had forgotten. She remembered their love like a rotting basement, decaying slowly over time. Her husband once told her she ruined his appetite just by being in the room. Nahisu was wilting, inside and out. Her work schedule was brutal, juggling 3 jobs to survive. A co-worker who saw her schedule was shocked, but Nahisu just brushed it off, told her to get back to work. While arranging flowers at her 3rd job, she reflected on how she'd worked hard her entire life just to build a home, with no help from her parents. Then everything came crashing down. Her husband, who had promised her peace, had secretly racked up massive debts in her name, and yet she forgave him. He cried, promised they'd get through it, promised a fresh start. She had believed that if she just worked hard, everything would eventually be okay. But reality kept proving otherwise. Debts kept growing, and love kept dying. A sudden doorbell snapped her out of those thoughts. A handsome young man entered the flower shop. Her co-worker eagerly mentioned that he came every day for a bouquet of roses. She offered to serve him, since she had a crush on him. But something surprising happened. The man walked right past her and stopped in front of Nahisu. He gently tapped the counter and asked her to take his order. Nahisu was confused. Why her? Still, she stepped forward. She asked if he wanted roses again. He smiled, said he was glad she remembered. While preparing the bouquet, Nahisu was lost in thought. Some people were just born to be admired, to shine. People like him. And then there were people like her, invisible, worn down, forgotten. She handed him the bouquet and caught herself thinking about him more than she should. Her co-worker later teased her, said the guy always came during her shifts and only let Nahisu serve him. Nahisu was surprised. She hadn't even noticed. The co-worker was shocked. How could she not recognize such a handsome regular? Nahisu admitted that she was just too tired to notice much these days. Her friend insisted he clearly liked her. Nahisu laughed it off. A man like him couldn't possibly like a woman like her. She was older, burdened, worn down by life. But her friend told her that nowadays dating someone older is actually trendy. Besides, he never took his eyes off her. Meanwhile, the man was admiring the bouquet and the woman who crafted it. She might not have known it, but to him, she was already beautiful. Nahisu couldn't bring herself to believe her co-worker's words. How could a stranger admire her, notice her, when the man she lived with found her so unattractive? Her friend kept nudging her, teasing that she and the handsome customer would make a perfect couple. But Nahisu smiled weakly and admitted that she already had a man. She remembered the night before. He'd come home late again. No greeting, no warmth, just grumbling about food. His shirt landed on the floor before he disappeared into the shower. By the time he emerged, she was already lying down, eyes closed, too drained to speak. He climbed into bed beside her, fed, cleaned, and reached for her. Despite everything, he still found her figure appealing, even if he said otherwise. He leaned in, his lips brushing her neck, said he missed her. But Nahisu didn't move. He called her name gently, then louder. She murmured that she was tired. He pulled away sharply, muttering that she was always tired, always distant. He accused her of being cold and dramatic, said plenty of women worked but still had time for their husbands. Then he rolled over and turned his back. Nahisu finally exhaled and drifted off to sleep. Her mornings always started before sunrise. Even when her shift wasn't early, she still woke up early. Minchul hated eating the same food twice, so every morning she cooked him a fresh breakfast, packed it carefully, and left the house without even feeding herself. Still, she arrived at work with a smile, changed into her uniform, skipped breakfast again. She could wait until lunch. The bell above the flower shop door jingled. A customer had arrived. Nahesu looked up and saw him, the same handsome man from before. Without thinking, she greeted him and offered to prepare his usual bouquet of roses. He smiled and nodded. While she rang him up, she caught herself listening closely to his voice. Low, smooth, and oddly comforting. She hadn't noticed before how warm it sounded. Just as she pushed the check across the counter, her stomach growled loudly. Her eyes widened. She hoped he hadn't heard. He glanced up briefly, surprised, but didn't say anything. Instead, he texted someone, probably his driver, and sat down to wait. A few minutes later, her coworker spotted him outside the shop window. He stood on the sidewalk, drink in hand, talking to someone. The sunlight hit his face just right. "He looks like a freaking model," the girl whispered. "Seriously, how is this guy even real?" Eventually, he returned to pick up the bouquet. Then, without a word, he left. Nahesu turned back to the counter, only to find a neatly wrapped sandwich sitting there. She rushed outside, calling after him. He stopped and turned as she caught up to him. "You forgot your sandwich," she said, but he smiled and shook his head. "I bought it for you." She froze. He turned to leave again, but she instinctively grabbed his jacket. "I can't accept this," she whispered. He chuckled softly. "What, don't want to eat it dry?" Then held out his drink. "I already took a sip. No poison, promise." There was something disarming in his smile. She took the cup, didn't argue further. Back inside, she sat down in silence. Her friends were already buzzing. They insisted the guy had feelings for her. He bought you a sandwich, gave you his drink. That's not just kindness. But when Nahesu looked at her reflection in the mirror, she didn't see what they saw. All she saw was a pale, exhausted woman with no makeup, dull eyes, and wounds from life no one could see. She told herself it must be pity. It had to be. And if, by some miracle, it wasn't pity, then she needed to shut it down now. She had no space in her life for daydreams. No room for fantasy. Still, a quiet voice inside whispered, "What if?" Later, when her friend gushed about how lucky she was, Nahesu said gently, "I'm married." Her coworker fell silent, embarrassed. She hadn't known. Nahesu didn't explain further, but in her mind she recalled what she wasn't allowed to say. They had divorced because of the debt. On paper, they were no longer together, but they still lived in the same apartment. Minchul had insisted no one could know. He didn't want anyone thinking less of him. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, at a bright, modern office, a pretty young intern handed Minchul a coffee. There was a sticker on the cup. "Have a great day." Minchul raised an eyebrow, surprised. The girl smiled shyly and hummed as she walked away. During a break, he lit a cigarette beside a graying coworker. The older man nudged him, nodding toward the intern. "Ari's into you, huh?" he said with a knowing smirk. "She's young, beautiful, smart. You're lucky, man." Then came the crude jokes. The kind men share when they think no one's listening. "You've still got it. Might as well enjoy it while you can." Minchul laughed, said he was single. Just then, Ari passed by with her friend. She caught his eye and smiled. He watched her walk away. That night, he watched TV, remote in hand, unbothered. Behind him, Nahesu cleaned the apartment silently, like she always did. Nahesu had only asked how things were going at work. Minchul snapped, said he was tired, told her not to bother him with pointless questions. She quietly replied that she was just worried that once he got a permanent position, maybe they could finally pay off their debts faster, maybe even get married again. That last part pushed him over. He told her to stop nagging, claimed she couldn't survive a single day without him, so she shouldn't act bold. Then, almost instantly, he shifted his tone. As if remembering something, he softened his voice and mentioned he needed new cologne. "What, you want your man smelling bad at the office?" When Nahesu hesitated, said they couldn't afford it this month, he flared up again, said he deserved it, said she was just stingy, then walked away and lay down to rest. The next morning, Nahesu sat at the edge of the bed, calculator in hand. She quietly tallied up how much Minchul had spent just to look office-ready. Nice clothes, haircuts, skincare. She understood. A man his age, wanting to appear sharp in a professional setting. That wasn't unreasonable, but it didn't change the fact that their debt kept growing, no matter how hard they worked. To please him, she decided to pick up extra shifts. Before leaving, she placed the money for the perfume on the table. It would mean overtime, but at least he'd be happy. That night, two young men were smoking in an alley behind a small eatery. One of them looked surprised. "You invited us out?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at Bom Taiha. "You hate noisy places." Taiha's friend grinned, then asked if he could bring a couple of girls along. Taiha didn't mind. That alone made the friend even more suspicious. Taiha never went to cheap diners, never hung out with anyone outside work. The two of them finished their smokes and walked inside. Taiha actually looked excited. The place was dimly lit, heavy with the scent of grilled meat and beer. In a corner, some drunk men argued about women. A good wife knows how to treat her husband. She should be gentle, loyal, always pleasing him. Nahesu overheard them as she cleared dishes nearby. Their words hit a sore spot. She had tried, always did, but still, Minchul only ever gave her complaints. There was a time he was sweet, affectionate, thoughtful. She wondered, was this her fault or just time? Suddenly, the front door chimed. A group of young men walked in, chatting and laughing. Her heart skipped. Among them was him, the handsome customer from the flower shop. She froze. Speechless, the group's energy filled the room. The girl at the center chirped that they needed a table for 4. Nahesu silently led them over. As they browsed the menu, she collected herself. It struck her. This wasn't some fancy place. Why would he come here? Then her friend's voice echoed in her mind. He likes you. But no, Nahesu didn't believe it, didn't want to believe it. She kept her distance, avoided eye contact. Still, she couldn't help but glance at the girl sitting next to him. Were they dating? That girl kept trying to start a conversation, but Bom Taiha's gaze stayed fixed on Nahesu. Who are you looking at? She finally asked. Their friend laughed. She's not his girlfriend, Heiji. Don't bother. Heiji frowned. The boys bickered a bit before one of them pointed out their food was burning. They settled down to eat. But Heiji had noticed. Taiha's eyes hadn't stopped trailing the waitress. Do you know her? She asked. Taiha cracked a faint smile. Yeah, I do. Back at the counter, Nahesu noticed her coat had a tear. The same coat she'd just bought last month. Minchul would be furious. That night, as she quietly stitched the sleeve, Minchul glanced up from his phone. You sewing in front of me now? He said sharply, snatching it from her hands. Trying to guilt me? He raised his voice. Called it a rag. Said she dressed like an old woman. Said no man would ever want her. She said nothing, just sat there, silent. Her mind drifted again to that morning. The sandwich, the coffee, the kindness. She told herself it was pity, nothing more. Maybe Minchul sensed he went too far. He reached out, pulled her close. Even if no one wants you, he muttered. I'm still here, and she clung to that, because at that moment, he was all she had. The next morning, Nahesu prepared his breakfast like always. The forecast said it might rain, so she looked for umbrellas. There was only one intact one. The other was bent, but usable. She chose the broken one, like always. Nahesu had left the only good umbrella for Minchul. She didn't want him getting soaked on the way home. Meanwhile, in the break room, Eri was all smiles as she headed for the coffee shelf. She knew Minchul would be there. Trying to draw his attention, she reached up toward the top shelf, pretending to search for coffee. Then came a sudden shriek. She screamed and clung to Minchul tightly. There was a bug! She cried out, pretending to tremble. A huge one! Minchul offered to check, but the bug had already disappeared. Still, her little act seemed to work. He felt unusually confident around her. Brave, even. Back at the flower shop, Haisu's co-worker let out a long, dramatic sigh. She was waiting for the flower shop's mysterious regular, Bom Tai-ha. As soon as he appeared through the window, Haisu's heart sank. She quickly asked her friend to handle the customers and slipped away to the back room. Tai-ha noticed her disappearing. It caught him off guard. She was running from him. Respecting her space, he placed his usual order with her co-worker, but his eyes remained on the empty hallway where she vanished. By the time the workday ended, the sky had opened up. The rain was heavy and relentless. The girls said their goodbyes. Haisu stood near the shop's exit, her thoughts spinning. She felt foolish for running away. She promised herself she'd act normal tomorrow. As she opened her umbrella, it immediately collapsed in her hands. The broken ribs snapped and sagged. She looked up at the dark clouds. No way she could walk home like this. She thought of calling Minchul, but she already knew how that'd go. He'd be annoyed, maybe worse. So she decided to wait it out under the awning. Then, quiet footsteps. And suddenly, someone shielded her with an umbrella. She turned. It was him, Bom Tai-ha. Where do you live? He asked calmly, startled. Haisu thanked him quickly and said it wasn't necessary. She was fine, but he didn't move. He just looked at her, unwavering. I want to walk with you, he said gently. Let's share the umbrella. Haisu felt like the universe was playing with her, pushing her heart into the clouds and dropping it over and over again. But the man just stood there, confident, quiet, waiting. Refusing would be awkward, so together they started walking. They stood at a crosswalk in silence. He didn't force conversation, and the gentle sound of the rain felt oddly peaceful. Tai-ha walked just slightly behind her, tilting the umbrella so that not a single drop landed on her shoulder. He adjusted his pace to match hers. Haisu noticed. With Minchul, she always had to walk fast to keep up, or run. Suddenly, a thought crept into her mind. She had seen Tai-ha at the diner, with a girl. Won't your girlfriend mind you walking under an umbrella with another woman? She asked. He turned his head, amused. Girlfriend? He smiled. Why do you think I have one? She admitted she'd seen him at the restaurant, with friends and a girl beside him. He chuckled softly. No. You've got it wrong. That wasn't a date, just friends. Then, with a quiet sincerity, he moved a little closer. It's true. Please believe me. Haisu nodded hesitantly. She didn't know why she felt so nervous. Suddenly, headlights curved around the corner. A horn blared. Tai-ha moved fast, grabbing her shoulder, pulling her close. A car splashed through a puddle. soaking him completely. "Heisu?" Not a drop. She found herself pressed tightly against his chest. Safe. He apologized for startling her, said he thought the car might hit her. Heisu stood frozen, acutely aware of how close they were. He'd used his body like a shield, held her like she was something delicate. "I'm big, huh?" he said suddenly. She looked up, puzzled. "My height, I mean," he clarified, grinning. "Good thing I was tall enough to cover you." Heisu didn't know what to say. Was he just being kind, or was it something else? As they continued walking, she finally spoke. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Her voice was quiet, unsure. "People don't usually act this way unless they want something." He glanced at her, smirking. "You caught me. I do want something." She froze. "I want to get to know you." She shook her head. "That's not possible." "Why not?" he asked, almost teasing. "You're young, handsome. Girls like you," she said. "I'm just an Ajuma. It doesn't make sense." When they reached her home, she thanked him politely, but he wasn't done. "Are you sure?" he said gently. "You don't want to get to know me?" She hesitated for a moment, then forced a small smile. "Let's just stay strangers." There was no point in complicating things. Bom Tai-ha understood that. He nodded calmly, promised to respect her wish, and walked away. Nahaisu stood there, watching him go. He looked so tall, so solid, and for a moment, her heart ached. He gave up too easily, but it had to be this way. Some lines weren't meant to be crossed. Back home, she noticed the umbrella she'd left for Minchul was untouched. Of course, he hadn't taken it with him. She thought about those men at the diner again. A woman should take care of her man. So she grabbed the spare umbrella and headed out to meet him at work, hoping, just hoping, he'd see her effort and appreciate it. People were starting to leave the office building, umbrellas blooming across the sidewalk. But Minchul didn't come out. She checked her phone. No response. Still switched off. Maybe he left already? And then she saw him, walking in the rain, under an umbrella, with a pretty young girl beside him. Her feet froze in place. The couple spotted her. Minchul looked caught. The girl looked curious. "Oh, this is a family member," he muttered to the girl. "She came because of the rain." Haisu's chest tightened. "Family?" Minchul turned to her. "You shouldn't have come. I could have made it on my own." He quickly waved goodbye to the girl and pulled Haisu away. Then, once they were alone, he snapped. "What were you thinking? You know I don't like being seen with you." Haisu asked quietly. "Who was that girl?" His voice rose. "She's just a coworker. She was being helpful. Unlike you wouldn't understand. You don't even have friends." Heisu said nothing, but in her mind, she suddenly saw the image of Bom Tai-ha again. His soft smile, his quiet warmth, and guilt bloomed in her chest. Even now, she still felt like she owed Minchul something. That night, work was heavy. The girls had just taken a huge order. Exhausted, they sat to catch their breath. Heisu's co-worker complained that her arms were sore. Heisu offered to finish the shift alone, told her to rest. The bell above the door chimed. A customer entered. Bom Tai-ha. The co-worker's eyes lit up. This might be her chance to finally serve him. But Haisu stepped forward first, out of habit. "Shall I make you your usual bouquet?" she asked softly. To her shock, he walked past her, didn't even glance her way. Ordered from the co-worker like she didn't exist. Her chest felt cold. 2 weeks had passed. Minchul was rarely home now, always at work, even on weekends. Haisu kept working, and as she had asked him, Bom Tai-ha acted like a stranger, just like she wanted, right? But now it stung. Maybe she had imagined his interest. Maybe it was just kindness. Or maybe it was better this way, because if his feelings were real, they'd only bring pain. Minchul no longer replied to her messages. She fell asleep before he came home, left before he woke. It was like they lived in 2 different shadows of the same house. One night at the diner, a group of men sat at a table. One of them was loudly celebrating his divorce. He bragged about his freedom, said he'd finally get to chase young women again. His friends laughed and cheered. There were crass jokes, dirty laughs. But suddenly, the man's eyes locked on Haisu. She was clearing dishes nearby. He eyed her openly. Not bad, he thought. Nice figure, cute face. He was a regular, owned a business. Surely she'd be flattered. "Hey, come pour me a drink," he barked. "And drink one with me, too." Haisu froze. Uncomfortable. She politely declined. That set him off. "What? Too good for me? I'll report you. Get this place shut down." The owner rushed out, trying to calm things down. Nearby, customers murmured support. Said the man was harassing her. "I'm a regular," the man shouted. "You should serve me how I want, or I won't be back." The owner apologized, offered to comp his meal, but the man wasn't done. "Tell her to kneel and apologize." Everyone went quiet, and then slowly, Haisu dropped to her knees. She whispered an apology for being rude, for causing trouble. The owner grabbed her hand, panicked. "Don't do this," he said. "It's not your fault. Stand up." His voice cracked. "You already have such a hard life. Don't let a scumbag like that humiliate you." His concern made her feel even smaller, even more broken, because sometimes kindness could hurt more than cruelty. She assured her boss everything was fine. She didn't want the diner to lose a regular over one unpleasant scene. After all, Haisu had been through worse. She had worked since she was young. Facing hardship was second nature by now. Eventually, You just stop letting things hurt. The boss offered to drive her home, but Haisu gently declined. She was heading straight to her next job. That made him pause. When do you even rest? He asked. It wasn't meant to offend, but curiosity slipped in. Haisu just smiled. Yes, I do have that much debt. Her mind flashed back. The first time the debt collectors came, screaming, shoving, destroying their apartment, threatening their lives. Minchul had cried, promising they'd make it through and start again. She believed him then. Now, every day she lived under the shadow of debt. Elsewhere, a drunken man was wobbling home. He was mumbling to himself, still basking in the thrill of making that waitress kneel. He grinned. She'll behave now. She knows her place. He didn't realize someone was trailing him. Boots echoed behind him. Then, crack! A fist slammed into his gut. The man hit the pavement hard, stunned. Who the hell? He yelled, struggling up. A hand gripped his hair and yanked his head up. Wanna die tonight? A low voice asked. The drunk glared up, full of bravado. You think I'm scared? You're dead. Slap! He landed a shaky slap on the stranger. Smirking, the man wiped his lip. You don't know who I am? No. Well, you're about to. And then, blood splattered across the alley. Later that evening, Nahesu was quietly working the night shift at a convenience store. Though it was late, the shelves still needed restocking. She was running on fumes. Her eyelids drooped. She drifted slightly. A noise stirred her awake. She opened her mouth to greet the customer, but then stopped. It was him, the handsome man from the flower shop. Again. Why does he keep showing up everywhere I work? Despite her unease, there was no one else to serve him. He placed a single item on the counter, a box of Band-Aids. She finally looked up and gasped. Cuts on his lip, bruises on his jaw. His face was battered. Her heart sank. What had happened to him? He stared at her. Unreadable. She wanted to ask, but reminded herself they weren't supposed to talk anymore. Still, she couldn't stay silent. If you just stick a Band-Aid on without ointment, she said softly, it'll get infected. Bom Tai-ha blinked. Then, he smiled. He hadn't expected her to care. He leaned in slowly, arms folded on the counter, eyes dancing with mischief. Then, what should I do? Can you teach me? His closeness caught her off guard. He wasn't rude, just playful, but her heart was thumping. She cleared her throat. Well, I am older than you. I guess I'll have to help. That made him grin. She motioned him to follow. Let's sit outside, she said. I'll fix you up. He followed without a word, obedient, like a puppy on a leash. Outside, she handed him a tube of ointment. I don't know how to use it, he said with mock innocence. Men, she muttered, annoyed. Hold still. This might sting. She gently dabbed the cuts. Does it hurt? It tickles, he said, voice soft. Her hands slowed. Something about the moment felt too quiet, too intimate. She asked, how old are you? He smirked, but she interrupted herself. Wait, what kind of grown-up gets into fights like this? It wasn't my fault, he replied. It's just life. There's not much joy in it. And things at home. Those words stopped her cold. Not much joy in it. They echoed in her chest. She looked up and into his eyes. Behind his playful gaze was sadness. Familiar sadness. The kind she knew too well. She held his gaze for a moment, then made a choice. You asked me once, she said, if we could get to know each other. She exhaled. Okay, let's get to know each other.